a lot of our.
All good? All right.
Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the May 8th, 2025 Louisville Planning Commission meeting with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Hunt.
Here.
Commissioner Bangs.
Here.
Commissioner Mullane.
Here.
Commissioner Mahaley.
Present.
Commissioner Choi.
Present.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Here. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have anybody who wants to speak for items that are not on this evening's agenda? All right, seeing none, can somebody check online for me? Yeah, nobody, okay, sounds good. We'll move into our first item of business, a general development plan yard and bulk requirements code amendment. Director Zucchero. Here, I'll start with this. So I will now open the public hearing on a request for a general development plan yard and bulk requirements code amendment. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to staff. Next, we'll have a presentation and testimony by the applicant, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant. After these two presentations and testimony by the applicant, after these two presentations, members of the public who have joined this meeting in person, by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak in person is asked to complete a speaker card, use the raise hand function if participating by computer, or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. 2 people present at the meeting may pool their minutes to allow 1 person to speak for up to a total of 6 minutes. The purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant and staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The Planning Commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your name and city of residence. Does anyone participating in this hearing object to the procedure I've described? Hearing none. Do we have notification?
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Rob Zucchero with the Community Development Department. I'm going to be making the presentation here this evening. There was public notice made for this item. It is a legislative item. It's not property specific, but it is a public hearing for an ordinance amendment, and public notice was made to meet the code requirements. Chair, we are having a technical issue here. I just noticed that the lectern is not plugged in. So I'm trying to get that fixed. If you give me just a
appropriate
minute.
amount of time to fix it.
Thanks.
Absolutely. In the meantime, do we have any disclosures from the Planning Commission anybody needs to make? Seeing none.
Did you get it? Oh, okay.
This will take a couple minutes to reboot, but it should restart.
Okay. All right, so I think it is rebooting here, and hopefully it comes up here soon. If not, I might try, see if I get the click share to come up. Something is happening here, just so you know.
Yeah, all right. That sounds
Something
like
just turned
progress.
on.
Well, I guess we do require the most recent hire from your department to ad lib during this period of time. Test of your mettle, really.
And there's nothing like trying to get computer to work while everybody's watching you. It's also really awesome.
Hey, Ben, do you want to try going to click share? See if we can get that to work. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get, oh. Oh, here we go. All right, I'm going to try to beat the system here and just get started while this is still booting up. So I'll use the click share. So again, I'm going to be presenting on this. What you have before you is a resolution recommending approval to City Council, an ordinance amendment to Section 1772-190. So this is in relation to yard and bulk requirements on general development plans. So this is a proposal from a property owner. So any property owner in the city can initiate a zoning text amendment in addition to zoning map amendments. So this is legislative, but the property owner does own 2 properties within our planned community zone district that is governed by general development plans. They've recently purchased a property in the Red Tail Ridge development, which is under the ConocoPhillips General Development Plan, and they're planning to develop under that property. But again, this is legislative. It's applicable to the whole city. It's not specific to any one property. So as you know, you've all seen general development plans. You've seen planned community zone district zoning. What's being proposed is to allow establishment of basically custom yard and bulk standards within a general development plan. So those are typically heights, setbacks, and lot coverage, we call them yard and bulk standards. So how big a building could be basically, and how close it has to be, or how far away it has to be from property lines and other things. So the current code restricts yard and bulk standards on GDPs to be in general conformance with comparable zone districts, and then it lists several comparable zone districts. Hopefully you saw in your packet, we have several different GDPs. That's a vague term just to say in general conformance. So it's been interpreted differently over the decades, as we've seen with different GDPs. But in this case, what is being proposed is to change this section to really to provide clarity when you are amending or approving a general development plan, to create that development standard for the yard and bulk standards. That's in a way the purpose of a general development plan. In a way, it's a purpose of a planned community zone district is to create custom zoning standards for the property. So this was kind of a limitation on doing that general development plan standard. So this is what's being proposed on the text amendment. Basically says that you will establish your yard and bulk standards on the general development plan, and that they need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, any other adopted policies of the city. But the intent is that Planning Commission, City Council will determine the desired character on the general development plan. You're creating the zoning or design standards. So just a little background. Again, the original code was adopted in 1983. This language hasn't really changed since 1983. The process hasn't really changed since 1983. Yard and bulk standards are required to be on general development plans, but again, they're supposed to be in general conformance with those comparable standards. And then the idea is that when you come in for your planned unit development, potentially you could get a waiver. Now, when you come in for the PUD, the benefit of that could be that you have the architecture and the site planning, and if you're asking for yard and bulk waivers, you have more information. But this proposal, would allow and really facilitate general development plans to have design standards on them and provide more predictability for property owners who are trying to develop the property at that GDP level. So if you look at the actual PCZD code, the idea is that the actual stated purpose is to use contemporary land planning principles and coordinated community design. How we think about that is that our basic zoning isn't what we want here. We want to do something custom, basically, for this district. And the general development plan through the Planned Community Zone District is the method. It's how you create that custom contemporary land planning for that district. GDPs are required to dictate the type and character of development. Yard and bulk standards are central to dictating the character of that development. So if you're approving a general development plan and you're not really saying what you want the yard and bulk standards to be, and then you have to wait for a PUD to come in, it doesn't provide good predictability for property owners who are wanting to develop, and it doesn't allow you, when you're master planning the whole development, to really dictate the desired character of the development. So another thing to note is that if this does pass and goes into effect, as staff was contemplating this, it doesn't mean Planning Commission and Council have to accept any big deviations in the yard and bulk standards when you're approving GDPs or GDP amendments. You could determine that a comparable underlying zone district and being close to that is appropriate. So there's no obligation just by changing the code to say you have to allow something that significantly deviates from those comparable zone districts. An applicant would have to come in and demonstrate that it's appropriate for that district and that probably they have design standards that will mitigate height, for example. If somebody's coming in and asking for more than 3 stories, having design standards or limitations on the taller aspects of the buildings, preserving view corridors, that could be analyzed and determined through the general development plan process. So again, in staff's analysis, we would hope that this would provide a more predictable process for property owners and developers, which gets us to our city council work plan. The city council, the last year, 2 years, especially as we've been updating our comprehensive plan, have asked staff, and I know this isn't staff initiated, but I do think it fits in with this city council work plan item. They've asked us to identify near-term targeted priority code updates even before implementing the comprehensive plan. And we're not changing land uses or anything here, but basically they've asked us if there's process improvements to our development code that we want to bring forward, they're asking us to bring those forward for consideration. And the idea is to have a more business-friendly approach to our process. Again, this doesn't change your discretion on approving what is an appropriate yard or bulk standard. It just changes the process of how and when it gets determined. So we do think this is consistent with what City Council has asked us to do. We are planning to update our whole land development code after the comprehensive plan. It's been budgeted, it's in the work plan, so once we adopt the comprehensive plan update later this year, we do intend to do a rewrite of our land development code and update all of our processes. But this is, again, trying to get ahead of that with a targeted amendment potentially. So staff is recommending approval of the proposal that we received, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here and would like to make a presentation or a statement as well.
Great, thank you. Commissioner, questions for Director Zucchero?
I'll start. I just want to make sure I understand the implications of this. It sounds to me, and
I'm mostly just recapping and getting confirmation, that all this does really is it sort of changes the timeline of, and the presumptions of applying these yard and bulk standards, because in the past, they would have to come at the PUD approval process and then get waivers. And now instead, it front loads it a little bit more. They have to come earlier with what they want the whole community to look like.
Yeah, they can. It gives them the opportunity to.
Right.
Right? They can still go through the PUD waiver process in the future, or if this were to pass, then they'd have the option at the time of GDP approval to get, a height approval. And the way the GDPs work is they're basically setting the zoning standards. So it doesn't even give the final development approval. It just sets the parameters of what you want that development to look like
Right.
at the GDP stage.
Okay. I think I understand
But
what
I
you're
think
talking about.
how you
But
describe it
staff
is
would still
correct.
work with them
Yep.
to figure out appropriate zoning for this particular, zone district that's,
Absolutely. I would expect someone who would come in with a GDP or a GDP amendment and was asking for something significantly different from the comparable yard and bulk standards would have to provide, a lot of analysis and demonstration of why a deviation from that would be appropriate.
and I guess when you say that it is, provides more certainty or predictability for the developers, is that just because they have that option at the beginning to sort of set out what they want the whole community to look like?
Yeah,
Earlier.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, so the way we look at it is if we set, adopting a general development plan is a pretty big deal. They have to be big properties, single ownership. Again, you're creating a whole new zoning, custom zoning. And so when a developer comes in or a property owner for that single lot development, they have to put a lot, we require full engineering drawings, full architecture drawings. And if they don't know what the desired outcome of the zoning standards are going into that process, that's a difficult, unpredictable, and maybe expensive process for them where they could get rejected. So again, you're not obligated to approve anything in particular at the PUD if it doesn't meet all the standards, but this gives them more assurance that, yeah, we've looked at this, we think these yard and bulk and height and setbacks are appropriate. So when they develop their plans, they'll have more surety that they're on the right track of the desired character.
And then one last thing, and I'll shut up. I did note that it looks like if they don't do that at the beginning, then the way it has been you would still look at those other uses to set the yard and bulk requirements.
Yeah, so we left that language in there because we think there's some general development plans that have portions of them that there are no yard and bulk standards. So we want to leave that language in there for the existing GDPs mostly so that we know what to reference back to.
But I said I was going to be quiet, but so the idea is, as I understand it, is that because these are custom zoning, it doesn't necessarily make sense to reference those other yard and bulk requirements for non-custom zones. Is that the idea?
Right, I think that would be the justification
Okay.
for supporting this, yes.
Commissioner Hunt, all great questions. If you have any more, please follow on. Yeah.
Well, I do read statutes for a living, so.
Additional questions?
I guess I got a question. Yeah, maybe following the same line of questioning. So if we don't approve this code, any developer would need to come and seek waivers from established yard and bulk requirements.
Correct.
We accept this code. You've used this phrase of it would be compared to a definition of comparable zone districts. What does that
Right.
actually mean?
Yes. So this is confusing, and so again, we have many different GDPs, and they've all been interpreted differently over the decades and how it's been applied. But some of our GDPs just simply refer to the zone district. Some GDPs actually set the standard, so they'll say, we actually want 40 feet of height or 50 feet of height. But our underlying zoning really only allows 35 and then some additional height for screening at the most. So I think Can you restate your question? I just want to make sure I answer it
Yeah,
right.
definition of comparable
Yeah,
zone
so-
districts.
right.
Who,
Who determines that?
Yeah, exactly.
So this, I think this is one of the problems with this code, is if it's not explicitly stated on the GDP, or we're doing a new GDP, we don't, like, we can guess which one we want to compare it to. They're all fairly similar, so we end up going to, if it's commercial or industrial uses, we go to those codes and we say, you have to be generally in compliance with those. We don't know what that means. Does that mean you can go 5 feet above or 10 feet above, or you can't go above the underlying code at all? It's really not clear. I mean, I think this, regardless of this application, in I think staff's opinion, we would want to amend this code for clarity in the future anyways, at the very least, to say exactly what we mean by the comparable codes.
So you're getting rid of, except for the ones that are sort of older
Yes.
ones, you're getting rid of that and putting it hopefully on the applicants to come in with what they think it ought to be like
Yep.
for your consideration, for our consideration and council's,
Correct.
before you get to the PUD.
Yeah, and again, it does have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan or another adopted policy of the city. We did put in there, you know, and the desired character of the district, because I think that's important too. Again, these are custom zoning, so this is a little bit of a discussion with Planning Commission and City Council of what the desired character is. Sometimes that's going to be really clear in the comprehensive plan. If it isn't really clear in the comprehensive plan, that's why we put that additional language in.
so help me understand. I mean, we want to be as friendly as possible, but the existing waiver process seems to work. There's enough precedent and probably enough guidance from city staff that any developer would know and understand what waivers are likely to be approved. So why?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, that's a great question. I'd say sometimes yes, sometimes no. And, you know, we do work with applicants for a long time before an application comes in. I would say we try to guide on what's an appropriate waiver. Sometimes it's really not clear because policies change over time too, and councils change on kind of what they want to see. And so if it's not clearly stated in the comprehensive plan, sometimes we do have a hard time guiding them. And then frankly, I think the bigger issue is when a property owner or developer comes in and they're about to spend a significant amount of money developing the PUD. And the GDP says you can only have 35 feet in height, and they want 50 feet in height, just as an example. That's a big risk for them to spend probably hundreds of thousands of dollars developing plans to get in front of city council. And they may say no, they're not sure.
So is there a risk that if we pass this and now it becomes part of the GDP, is it easier or more difficult for us to redefine what they've pushed back on, what they've requested, as opposed to the waiver process that exists today?
Yeah, well, I think the idea is that everybody's going to know what's desired in that district or what's acceptable in that district from a yard and bulk standard. So there won't need to be as much discussion or the very, very subjective waiver process. There will be more predictability for everybody, Planning Commission, City Council, because we have looked at it, we've established the desire, and then they have the opportunity to make the PUD in compliance. So I think that makes it easier for everybody along the way, again, as long as you're comfortable putting that regulation on the GDP. And that's going to be the burden of the applicant to demonstrate a Planning Commission, City Council's comfort to even put it on the GDP in the first place.
Because we're basically doing a custom
Yes.
zone
Yeah.
for these particular, these GDPs. And so at the outset, we will have set what we think this zone yard and bulk requirement should be. So we won't have to then argue about it later in the PUD. They'll have certainty. But we still get to help decide that based on the comprehensive plan. Is that right? Is that what I mean?
Yeah. The comprehensive plan will guide, plus there'll be a public hearing for a GDP or GDP amendment.
So that's important, right? We would still have to hear the proposal with the GDP process.
Yes, I guess that's the we is what I'm looking to define.
planning commission and city council.
Well, city staff
Yeah.
will make a recommendation.
Yeah, city staff would make a recommendation on a GDP or GDP amendment. Yeah, we would analyze it and make a recommendation like any land use proposal.
But is the intent with the comprehensive plan, how much definition will be in the plan?
Yeah. Comprehensive plans aren't regulatory, and we try to not have really specific information in there because they aren't regulatory. I think the likely outcome of this comprehensive plan is that there might be areas of town that have ranges of what's desirable as far as land uses or building heights. And then those ranges then get determined at the GDP or the PUD stage, the actual height. I know it's difficult to comprehend, like how all the different processes layer, and I apologize because we do it so much. Sometimes I kind of gloss over the process. So please ask questions. if
Yeah, I'm
it's
still
not clear.
struggling to understand why the waiver process
Yeah.
is inadequate.
Yeah, I mean, the waiver process works. It's a process where a property owner can get an adjustment, and it's not necessarily broken. It's just, is this a better process based on, really city council's direction of trying to we're trying to improve and make our development review processes more streamlined and more predictable.
Yep.
This would do that. As far as making it more streamlined and predictable for the business community and property owners. Then there's a question of, are you comfortable with still having enough assurance that you can establish the appropriate character through the process we're creating?
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to ask your opinion on that.
Yeah.
I understand the advantages
Yeah.
and don't want to stand in the way of improving efficiency. However, what's the downside in your opinion? What's the risk?
Right, yeah, I think, to look at kind of the two sides of the coin, the downside potentially is that you are making a decision without seeing the final design, right? So if you have a PUD, you're going to have the final architecture, the final site plan very precisely, and you have probably more information to determine the waiver at that time. So that would be why somebody might want to keep our current process.
So expand on that. What information will we have
Yeah,
versus what we'd have very specific. With a PUD, it would be.
yeah. You wouldn't have as specific of information. I would imagine that, they would have to, again, just using an example of, trying to think of some other examples here, but if they wanted to, like, if the minimum setbacks were 10 to 15 feet in the zone district, and they said, we want to do 0 lot line setbacks. Well, that's probably not, in general conformance with the zoning. That would be hard to argue if you're going from 10, 15-foot setbacks to 0-foot setbacks. So they could come in and say, well, here are neighborhoods that are being built with 0-foot setbacks.
Within the city of Louisville? Or
What's that?
Within the city of Louisville or?
Sure, within Louisville or comparable communities, you could and you could see how they're defining the character and say, see, if this is what we're intending to do, and we're going to write these design standards on the GDP that will, facilitate this type of physical development to, that makes that a nice place, right? If you're trying, I'm trying to go away from a commercial, but, because we do residential GDPs too. And we've done 0 setback residential GDPs. That is not allowed in most of our the comparable zone districts. But they're doing a more urban walkable neighborhood. And they're providing setbacks and they're demonstrating what it's going to look like and feel like to create that neighborhood character.
Right. So it would be more conceptual rather than specific designs.
Exactly. It would be completely conceptual. But then again, the stop, the backstop is they still have to come in for a PUD. And then you get to see everything at that time. And although, there's some leeway, but not as much at that time to say, there's issues with this development that you don't like.
But at that point, if the 20-foot setback is established in the GDP, they get that.
They could still potentially request a waiver.
Right, for something less
So,
than that,
yeah, so regardless of this, and something gets established, the PUD, you could still have waivers through the PUD process.
And I think that's a key point, because it's not like we're getting rid of waivers, because you would still have, because using the example of setbacks, we still have that waiver process later at the PUD. If they, if it was 20 and they come in at 18 or something, like you still have that level of review and exception discussion.
Correct.
But again, it sounds like the idea is these, it's been a little fuzzy because you don't know what general compliant, where's the language on there?
General conformance, yeah.
General conformance with which zones. I mean, it's difficult. And so now what you're doing is having them have the option to come in, because these are custom zones, to come in and say, here's what we think this neighborhood ought to look like in general. And then they can go and do their development plans
Right.
consistent with that, with a little bit more consistency or with dependability.
Right, that would be
Yeah.
a reason to adopt this is.
Commissioner Choi, sorry,
Thanks, Chair. So, Director Zuccaro, would this amendment only apply to those areas that are 30 acres or greater under single ownership within the city?
Yes, so this would only apply to properties zoned PCZD. To qualify for zoning, you have to be 30 acres or more and under single ownership. So,
And
yeah.
how many of those exist within the city?
Not a lot. I don't have the exact number. I think maybe up to 8. I could get the exact count, but I think, I forget how many I put in the staff report. I think I put the majority of them in the staff report. But I think I missed Centennial Valley maybe, so.
Yeah, I think there are 5 listed.
5, so maybe it's 6. We might have 6 full
Okay.
districts.
And it's reasonable that if this GDP standard was applied to the zone district under that single ownership greater than 30 acres criteria, that the development could occur, and then through subsequent action and application, the zone district could be further kind of divided and sold off as individualized properties if it met the other criteria, correct?
Right, yeah, so it only has to be under single ownership at the time of establishment of the original GDP. And then individual property owners can come in and amend the GDP for their parcel.
Just one other question. In staff report, there's a statement that says, for any newly proposed GDPs, differences between GDP and the zoning district could be subject to legal challenge.
Yeah.
Without the proposed amendment. Can you talk a little bit about what that statement is or what the anxiety is?
Yeah, so, yes, so if the city council wanted to adopt a new GDP or GDP amendment, and the underlying zoning says 35 feet, and the city council and planning commission actually wants to accept a proposal for 50 feet, that could be subject to potential legal challenge, because is that really in general conformance, just because of the code language? And so there was, and I am saying that based on some legal review, because back in 2010, when ConocoPhillips was actually developing their GDP, we did a review of this language, had the city attorney do a review of the language. I went back and looked at that analysis, and that was the conclusion, was that really general conformance is open to interpretation, but there's no really clear line when you've crossed the line. But, again, if it's 35 feet's the limit and you're going up to 50 feet, that doesn't feel and seem like it's general conformance. So that could be open to legal challenge.
And lawyers could milk that for years.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mullin.
Rob, I didn't have a chance to review the code before the meeting. Can you remind me when a GDP is required?
Right. The GDP is required when anybody requests the PCZD zone district. So basically, we created this in 1983 and invited property owners to come in and ask for the zoning. We didn't proactively zone any of the properties. So all the PCZD properties are ones that voluntarily came in and said, we want to enter into this process and work with the city to create a general development plan that establishes a zoning for the city. Now, do we have 30 acre plus vacant tracts right now under single ownership in our landlocked city? No. So this, you might also realize this might apply to a lot of GDP amendments in the future if it does pass. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of new full GDPs.
Thank you, very helpful.
On a process question, I am racking my brain. I don't remember last time we've had an outside party work to amend code. Are you aware of anything? I know it's legal.
Yeah, I haven't seen any in the last decade or so. I think it is pretty rare, but our code definitely, it does allow it. Again, the planning commission, the city council, or a property owner can initiate a zoning text amendment or a map amendment.
Great, thanks. Any additional questions for Director Zucchero at this time? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Can we invite the applicant up with your name and city of residence, please?
See if we can do a little height adjustment there. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Mark Smith, and I am the CEO of Advent Health Vista here in Louisville. Our address is 100 Health Park Drive here in Louisville. We are here this evening in support of the amendment to the GDP yard and bulk requirements. A little bit about Advent Health, not a lot. Advent Health, of which Vista is a part, is a national health system. We operate 55 hospitals in 9 states with over 1,000 clinics. As noted, we recently purchased 40 acres in the Red Tail Ridge development. And growth in the North Metro Denver region is a key part of our mission to serve our community and also part of our strategic plan. Let's see if we can get, there we go. Right now, Advent Health, in conjunction with our project team, is currently in the very early stages of design for planning the future at Red Tail Ridge. While the code amendment has been requested by Advent Health, as noted, the change is applicable to all planned community zone districts and allows the city to adopt development standards that reflect the intended character of that district. We are very supportive of this amendment because from our lens, the process dictated by the current city ordinance as written does make it challenging to engage in predictable planning and inhibits our design process. That means that both we as Advent Health as well as other property owners are unable to effectively progress design development the way that we would hope due to those uncertainties. We believe the code amendment, as it's proposed, allows the thoughtful progression of design to enhance our ultimate PUD submission, including comprehensive site planning, site access, the progression of traffic conversations, and facilitation of building stacking. We fully acknowledge we're going to need to meet design standards and the city requirements to move this project to approval. And we fully intend to follow the proper channels of the PUD process and work with the city to demonstrate those project specifics. For those reasons, we are in support of this amendment and believe it'll provide benefit to the planning process. I'm happy to answer any questions, although I would note that we have members of our project team here, and so any of the substantive aspects of this, they'll doubtless be more helpful in providing you a response.
Great, thank you. Open it up for questions. Commissioner questions? Oh, the applicant, really? So I guess you decided that it was better to go this route in affecting the code. It just makes it that much easier. I mean, I know you just kind of said that, but it is fairly rare.
It
So,
is.
Curious as to how you got to that point.
I think in nature of this project, we feel that the ability to have clarity for our development team, the project team, earlier now than waiting till the waiver process would be an impact, has real materiality to our ability to move this project forward.
So, yeah, maybe there's somebody amongst your speakers who could address, give us some tangible examples of why this would improve your design process over the existing PUD waiver process. What are you going to be able to do that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise?
I think Valerie Wilkins will be able to speak to that.
Thank you.
By having some certainties in that planning
Can you
process.
start with your name as well? Good.
Sorry, Valerie Wilkins, Adams Management, owner's rep for the hospital, for the project development,
City.
city of residence,
Yeah.
Morrison.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. By avoiding the waiver process farther down the process, we can get through our design development now, and we can have more comprehensive plan back on the GDP. If we know what your requirements are going to be for the yard and bulk side, our development package is going to be more comprehensive of what you were looking for from us, so we can come back and hopefully go through the process a little bit simpler, where you're not having to reject our proposals back and saying we've not met certain pieces. Helps us from a design standpoint that we can move through our different phases of design progress so that we can also advance and get to our final ultimate construction document set that'll move us forward for your final entitlements and then allow us to get building permit. So we're just trying to move through the process in a more comprehensive way of addressing what your ultimate needs are going to be. So it helps us understand yard and bulk, what we can put on the parcel and what we can understand and have our design match that.
So maybe it's a question for Director Zuccaro. Is the yard and bulk requirements today not clear?
So they're under the ConocoPhillips General Development Plan. I would say they are not clear on the General Development Plan. There's a note on the General Development Plan that has a wide range of heights that was intended for the ConocoPhillips development, and then it references the waiver process. So somebody coming in and designing a new project, it's not clearly stated what the desired height is for really any of the parcels based on how it's drafted currently.
Okay, so I know I'm being pedantic on this. Then if it's undefined, the developer is now going to define what they would like to do.
Right. So the developer, the property owner, and again, an application could come in for an individual parcel or for a whole district, potentially. And then there could be, and we do have GDPs that do this already. So if you look in your packet, their current campus GDP has different zones, and they have different zones that allow different heights. So they actually did this back when they did their original campus GDP. Again, our legal advice is that that isn't the way to do a GDP amendment now. And, but there's good reason to do it. But that's an example of where they defined, I think it was 4 different zones, and said in each of these zones, we can have different heights of buildings. And they demonstrated at that time, when they came into City Council and Planning Commission, that the hospital building is going to be a little taller. The medical office buildings don't need to be so tall. So we're going to show you generally where we're going to put those different height buildings. So it works. We have examples of it. Our code really just doesn't support it now. So we're trying to get that clarity.
Right. So if we take this specific example, how far down the design process will it be before the applicant comes with their intentions to Planning Commission? I mean, how iterative is that process, if at all, or is it?
So I would probably defer to them a little bit, but I want to try to answer if I'm understanding your question correctly. We're working with them right now. They're going to, they've recently applied for a GDP, so we clearly can't talk about any of the content of that GDP. But we will be working with them on the application materials to demonstrate what is appropriate or not appropriate. We actually have comprehensive plan policies that we'll be looking at now in relation to that. We'll have a new comprehensive plan soon, so we're going to take that into consideration as well in our analysis. So I don't know what you mean by iterative, but we'll be iterating with them on a potential GDP amendment, we expect, before they really get into the final PUD design is the whole point.
Okay.
But if they came before us with the GDP and we voted against it, that's the iterative part you're talking about?
Yeah. Okay.
Or told them
No,
to
yeah,
go back to the
yeah.
table, yeah.
Okay.
think per your question, that with the timeline of design for our GDP that we're trying to currently submit, we're through our concept design, so we're able to provide at least initial information. If we need to wait for the waiver process for PUD, we are talking later this year, and that's a significant amount of time that we'll go through, assuming what we think you will give us a waiver for, and our design will represent that, and then we could potentially get to that point and you say, no, sorry, that won't work, and we're kind of back to the drawing board.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Additional questions for the team? No? Seeing none? All right, we'll now open it up for public comment. As we do so, if I could have a motion to enter the email from Ms. Krantz into the record?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have cards for public comment? Yeah.
So it's Tamar Grants.
Hi, my name is Tamar Krantz. I live in Louisville, Ward 3. And I noticed a friend of mine came in. Cindy, would you be willing to lend me like 30 seconds of your time if you don't plan to speak?
Yes, I'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, because I prepared something to say, but I learned so much from the really good questions that you were asking that I have new questions. And my first question that I think that Commissioner Bangs asked is, what does Avista want for the property? Do they want different setbacks than are in the ConocoPhillips GDP? Now I'm starting to think that maybe this code amendment is going to facilitate changing the GDP more than helping with changing the setbacks for a particular property. If you guys were to pull up the ConocoPhillips GDP, I'm not sure that you would think that it was that hard to interpret what the setbacks are. For example, a building that has 30,000 square feet or more requires a 50-foot setback. And I was trying to visualize what that is by driving by the 7-Eleven, and those are like 100,000 square feet buildings. And I could kind of see how a 50-foot setback would be appropriate. Under this new code, it's kind of working rather than, like Rob said, it's going to help with what Director Suharu said, it's going to help us with GDP amendments. I'm not sure how it will work retroactively on existing GDPs, but so I think that we should ask the applicant what setbacks, what in the GDP right now is it that they don't like and they're going to want to and don't want to go for the waiver, go through this waiver process for. I'm really curious about that. I also am curious how this would work for existing GDPs. Maybe this is just a dumb question, but like in the table, that was just a sampling of the GDPs. What about the Centennial Valley GDP? That wasn't listed there, and I didn't get a chance to look. But would this change the setbacks that are in there right now, or only change the setbacks if they were to do a GDP amendment? I hope that you'll ask staff that question. And finally, I kind of object to the way that this is happening, because it is unusual, and I would like to be able to, as a resident, to be able to call or to call my former colleagues on the Planning Commission and say, hey, how does this work? Can we discuss this? Can we talk about it? And if this were a legislative action, I could call my city councilor or ask for a meeting and talk about how this would impact existing GDPs, how this works moving forward. So I really feel like this would be, I think there's a lot of questions that should be asked, and I would really hope that you would figure out if there might not be a better way to do this. And finally, with regard to the code, like the changes right now, if this is supposed to clarify things, I think you guys could do a lot better. I mean, I really appreciate the simplicity of what Director Zuccaro is doing and just changing a few lines. But general conformance, I mean, why not just say conformance? And then you say the nearest, the area that's the closest to it, is it agricultural, industrial, commercial? I mean, why not say the exact one that's specified in the GDP? Like if, for example, the ConocoPhillips says CC, commercial, why not follow those yard and bulk requirements? Those are the yard and bulk requirements that apply now. And if we want to change it, why not specify that it should apply the exact one, not the closest one? I mean, I think that would give a lot more clarity, and I hope that you guys could if you decide to move forward with this, that you could try to make it more clear. Because I honestly feel like this change is going to make it less clear, especially when you're putting the words comprehensive plan in there. And what takes precedence, specify what takes precedence, that table of yard and bulk requirements or the new the new things like in the comprehensive plan, because I know we're talking about raising the heights to potentially 5 stories in McCaslin. Is that in the comprehensive plan going to take precedent over the yard and bulk requirements that we currently have? Thanks for your time. Sorry, I'm just asking questions and not making a clear point, but I hope you'll ask more questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak for public comment on this? Can we check online? Nobody? Okay, great, thanks. Seeing no one else, I'd invite the applicant up again for a response and closing statement.
Thank you for an opportunity to speak one more time. I understand some of the questions that just came up. We are very early in our planning process, but we are not asking for any setbacks that vary from the GDP. We can firmly say that, so I know that was a question. Ours is more relative to the yard and bulk requirements. That is what we are specifically talking about. We are not, setbacks was just an example that was brought up in the conversation, but we thank you for your time tonight and thinking of approving our ordinance amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome staff with a
No further comments from staff. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Yeah, do we have any questions at this point while the public hearing is still open?
At risk of being pedantic, can you summarize one more time how this relates to the GDP? If this passes, how would this change the GDP amendment process?
Right. So
in the case of existing GDP?
yeah, so this wouldn't affect
Exactly. Yes,
existing,
thank you.
yes, this
Yeah.
wouldn't affect existing GDPs. All the existing GDPs have their yard and bulk standards listed on them already. So only if somebody came in for a new or an amended would this apply.
So the GDP amendment process is still there.
Yes.
Any additional questions for staff before we close?
Because it seems like it's still a little confusing, I just want to make sure, this continued reference to general conformance with yard and bulk requirements, that only applies if the GDP, like current ones, don't have specifics.
Most of them do.
Well, they do, right.
Yeah,
So-
most of them do have specifics. We left that language in there because there's probably some instances where if there's not a specific, we can go back and reference to the comparable.
Right, but for any GDP that is amended or comes in under this that has the yard and bulk requirements that are in the GDP, the rest of this, the bottom part of this statute won't even apply.
Right,
So we kind of no longer have to worry about this general conformance question.
correct.
Got it.
Additional questions? Or for the applicant? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing and the planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received unless we need to reopen it. Who would like to begin? Thoughts, ideas, concerns?
I've been talky. I'll start. I think I was a little confused by the original report, but I think that the presentations were really helpful. I understand what it is you're trying to do. I frankly was not aware we had these sort of custom zoning zones, and I think it's an interesting idea, and I like the idea of providing more certainty and dependability, and the fact that we still have the ability to review these GDPs and make sure that a particular area has the appropriate requirements in it for what that development is intended to be, and then we can look at whether it fits with our comprehensive plan before we, at the very beginning, I think is really useful and a good addition. I look forward to seeing what other amendments we do after the comprehensive plan is done, but I would be in favor of this.
Thank you.
I'll build on Commissioner Hunt's comments. To me, this is going to affect our district areas, and so to me, when you have a planned community zoning district, you're looking for some variation from our standard potentially from our standard, all of our standard zones. And so to me, that's what a GDP is going to be for. And for the GDPs to be able to provide that additional clarity of what's expected within that district property, I think, to me, clarity is kindness. So if something is clear, it's clear to everybody, it's transparent. And so I think I'm going to be in support of this. I think this is a benefit to the code, and I think it's a benefit to the community. I think it helps us understand better what's going to be happening on these district properties. It lets us see that better than we currently can. So, since it applies to those district properties where we're going to there's going to be some flexibility, not just our traditional zoning, I think this is a great tool. So I'm supportive of this change.
Thank you. Commissioner Choi.
Thanks, Chair. So building off a little bit of what Commissioner Moline said, I agree that I think the applicability of this proposal speaks and aligns well with the nature of what these specific zone districts are and how they are inherently different from a lot of the other different types of areas around the city where some of the more conservative standards are better applied. I actually think that this goes well towards getting away from the bring me a rock game when we have developers who are trying to work through the early stages, especially of design and planning for larger developments, where some of the more restrictive standards don't necessarily comply with the larger developments in their nature, and it really is, when they bring that rock, we say no, not that rock, a different rock. I think that gets to the point of what Commissioner Banks was saying about the waiver process, which, while it does work for a specific type of variance from requirements as established in different areas, I'm personally not that big of a fan of development applications that come through with a substantive amount of waivers. I think it's better to have requirements set forth that are more specific to the type of districts and the type of zoning areas that those settings would apply to. So generally, I'm in favor of it, if only for the reasons of clarity prior to the development and application process, and to establish some additional guideposts to try to almost get away from some of those waiver requests.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Mahaley.
So I will admit I came in with several reservations in regards to the process changes, and I would say that the presentation by Director Zuccaro, and then I would say that the detail-oriented line of questioning by Commissioner Bangs and Commissioner Hunt really helped address those reservations, because the, for lack of a better term, checks and balances and processes to help influence and maintain standards are still there by maintaining the GDP amendment process, and you still have the PUD waiver. Man, that's a mouthful. So those are still there. So I appreciate the presentation and the attention to detail. I didn't think that was pedantic at all. I thought it was on point, so thank you. So coming at this as a systems engineer, I see this as a process improvement. I think it's consistent with the vision of trying to be more friendly towards businesses by removing some of the risk. And also, as a systems engineer, I have a high appreciation for requirements definition, and it allows us to do that up front, and there's less risk and inherited by the developer in trying to, like Commissioner Choi just mentioned, make sure they bring the right rock before the Planning Commission. So being clear, I think this does improve clarity without removing our methods and processes as a Planning Commission to help maintain standards. So I appreciate the attention to detail and the lines of questioning, and I'm in favor.
Thank you.
I guess that leaves me. So I'm more convinced, largely based on the input from staff, that said, I guess I haven't been as engaged for as long as some to be as disenchanted as maybe some are with the existing PUD waiver process. So to my mind, it's not that broken that we need a radical change, but I am all about friendliness and efficiency and expediting progress. So I will support it, but I'm maybe not quite as convinced as everyone else that the existing process is that broken that it's not adequate.
Thank you. I guess I also find myself in favor at this time. I don't think we are giving away anything. I think we still maintain the ability to look at this at a reasonable level. Having worked previously in design, I can thoroughly appreciate how there's a lot of money on the line here of knowing what you're up against and coming in requesting a waiver and not getting that and having to send your team back to the drawing boards literally can be very expensive. I appreciate that this is a break from standard where it's different that we're having an applicant propose change to city code. I do find though that it is actually kind of relatively limited given the number of sites we have remaining throughout the city. And I don't, again, I don't feel like we're giving away yard and bulk requirements because they still have to make their case in advance. So we just move up that point in time. So with that then, I would request a roll call, please. Oh, a motion, yes. I've been skipping those a lot lately. Motion, please.
All right, I'll make the motion that we approve Resolution 6 of 2025, recommending to the City Council approval of an ordinance amending the Louisville Municipal Code Section 1772-190 regarding yard and bulk requirements for general development plans.
Second.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs,
Yes.
Commissioner Mullane,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Chair Brownhouse, Chair
Yes.
Brown Eyes.
It works, yes. The motion carries. Thank you for your preparation on this, and I think we may ultimately end up with a cleaner piece of city code paid for by others. All right, why don't we take a 5-minute break? We'll reconvene at 7:38.
Recording stopped.
6'5", and my mother was 6 foot. Inner stockings. That was a real height.
So the height is?
6 foot. Yeah. Our children are
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Welcome everybody back. Thank you very much. We will now move into, thank you. We'll now move into our second item of business. I will now open the public hearing on a request for a signage, planned unit development amendment as it regards to signage. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to staff. Next, we will have a presentation and testimony by the applicant, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant. After these two presentations, members of the public who have joined this meeting in person, by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak in person is asked to complete a speaker card. Use the raise hand function if participating by computer or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. 2 people present at the meeting may pool their minutes to allow one person to speak for up to a total of 6 minutes. The purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant and staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The Planning Commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, table, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your full name and city of residence. Does anyone participating in the hearing object to the procedure I've described? Seeing none, can we ask for notification, please?
Yes, all public notice requirements have been met.
Thank you. Do any planning commissioners have any disclosures? Seeing none, invite you up.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. This is Emily Klein Gibson, Planner 2, with the staff presentation. This is a request to approve an amended campus-wide sign package for the Advent Health Avista Hospital property located at 100 Health Park Drive. This will include replacing existing freestanding signs and adding a new wall sign. To provide a brief overview, this is a PUD amendment application for lots 2 through 4 of the Advent Health Avista Hospital property, which is located in the southern part of Louisville, west of 88th Street, and is outlined in the blue in the image on the screen. The amendment includes replacing 9 existing freestanding signs, removing 1 freestanding sign, relocating 1 freestanding sign, and adding 1 new wall sign. 4 existing wall signs are proposed to remain unchanged. This property has previously undergone sign changes since the establishment of a campus-wide master sign plan in 1990. The master sign plan consisted of 13 total freestanding and wall signs, including a freestanding sign facing US Highway 36 that was approved for installation on city property. An amendment to the master sign plan was approved in 1997, and the most recent signage was established in 2002. Each new sign amendment has been established to reflect hospital rebrand efforts, and many of the sign placement locations from the original master plan remain unchanged. To provide a brief background on Louisville's sign regulations, the original regulations were established in 1981 and underwent some minor changes in 1992 through 1994. A major update to the sign regulations was approved in 2006, and in 2019, all previous sign regulations were repealed and a new citywide sign code was established. While the original hospital master sign plan and amendments were established under the current sign regulations at that time, any new sign proposals now must comply with the 2019 adopted sign code. The details of the proposal, again, include replacing 9 freestanding directional signs, relocating 1 existing freestanding sign from city property to within the hospital property boundaries, removing 1 freestanding directional sign with no replacement, and adding 1 new wall sign. The images on the bottom right provide an example of what one of the freestanding signs will look like in daylight and at night, as well as the location of the wall sign shown in the image above. 5 waivers are requested for this application. 4 of the waiver requests are for the freestanding signs, and the last waiver request is for the wall sign. This slide shows exactly where on the property each sign will be located. Starting with the far western side of the property, the green boxes represent the sign that's currently on city property facing US 36 and where it would be located within the property boundaries of the hospital. The small blue sign box to the north shows the proposed wall sign location. The purple colored box in the center shows the existing freestanding sign that will be removed and not replaced. And all the orange boxes show existing freestanding signs that will be replaced in the same location and of similar size. And also shown on this site plan are 4 gray boxes towards the center. These represent the 4 existing wall signs that are proposed to remain unchanged. So the new signage is proposed to improve wayfinding around the hospital campus and reflect current Advent Health Advista hospital branding. The new freestanding signs are proposed to be in the same location and of similar size as the existing signs as shown in Table 1. And the sign that will be relocated onto hospital property is proposed to be 10 feet tall with a landscape base. The proposed wall sign will be 4.4 feet tall and approximately 131.7 square feet. Included with this request are 5 waivers from sign code requirements. These waivers include allowing the quantity of freestanding signs to exceed the maximum number of 4, which is permitted, to waive the requirements of an architectural base and border from all the freestanding signs, to waive the landscaping requirements at the base of the 9 existing freestanding signs, allow illumination of a red background on 5 freestanding signs where typically the illumination of only the letters is permitted, and to allow the area of the wall sign to exceed the maximum area permitted. Staff analyzed each sign against the criteria in our sign code and found that aside from the 5 waiver requests, all signs meet the criteria. Specific sign criteria include maximum freestanding sign heights and areas, as well as specific requirements for signage oriented towards US 36, which are allowed increases in those maximum sign areas and heights. And with the consideration of the waiver request number 5 specifically, the proposed wall sign also meets all criteria. Staff analyzed the waiver requests against the sign waiver criteria, found them to be consistent with the character, scale, and placement of previously approved signage on the hospital campus, with the understanding that most of these proposed freestanding signs are primarily provided for clear wayfinding around the hospital grounds. And staff also found the proposed waiver request for the size of the wall sign supports the intent of the sign to be visible from US 36 at a distance, and the proposed size would be scaled appropriately on the building wall. So with all of this, staff recommends approval of Resolution 7, Series 2025, recommending approval of a request for a planned unit development amendment to replace existing freestanding signs and add a new wall sign on the hospital campus with the 5 waivers and with no conditions. And this concludes the staff presentation. The applicant and members of the hospital team are present, and I believe they also have a presentation prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner questions for Ms. Glenn Gibson?
Chair, I just have a quick question.
Great, please go ahead.
Sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate that. Just one quick question and then maybe one follow on. Are these all proposed as internally illuminated signs?
Yes.
Okay, and I know that the sign code notwithstanding, is there an increase, a decrease, or no change to the lumen output from the new signage?
There is no change proposed.
Mr. Moline.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I've got a quick question about the requirement for architectural base and border. So that is in the new code? Yeah?
Yes, that's a requirement for freestanding signs. Typically, freestanding signs are used as at the entrance of shopping centers and stuff like that. So we did have that requirement for some architectural, stone columns and such. Since these are primarily wayfinding, the applicant believes that this waiver.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah,
course.
yep.
Additional questions, Commissioner
Yeah,
Banks?
the sign that's being relocated is one that faces 36.
Yes, correct.
And it's 10 feet high?
That's the proposed
And what-
height. That's the new
What
height.
is it today?
Today, I believe it's in the application materials. I don't know off the top of my head.
There's a table we can pull up.
Okay.
Somebody can pull up. Yeah. I'm curious about the sign that would be facing open space and the golf course primarily. And questioning the need or value of that sign. What considerations were taken into account when thinking about that open space and golf course and the fact that the sign is,
Are you specifically referring to the wall sign that faces the open space?
yeah.
Yeah, the applicant may be able to further provide their reasoning. I believe from what staff can gather is it's meant to be viewed from US 36. With the removal of the larger sign that's currently on the city property, that this would just add additional visibility from the highway.
Okay, thanks. Any additional questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. Welcome up the applicant. Again with, I know it's repeat, but name and city of residence, please.
We'll see if I can do better this time in being heard. Good evening again, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Mark Smith, CEO of Vista for Advent Health, 100 Health Park Drive. Appreciate very much the remarks and the very comprehensive presentation by Ms. Gibson. What I would like to do is just to speak to the necessity of signs for a hospital campus and the utility of that to aid the commission in making a decision. Advent Health has taken the last 2 or 3 years to consolidate its brands, and you saw the history of the various owners of Vista. We are moving from the Centura brand now to Advent Health as part of the disaffiliation process from Centura. And so that's what's precipitated some of the reworking of the signs and the need for this request, among other things. We believe that the signs and their locations are extremely important for our ability to operate our hospital in a safe and efficient manner. One of the things that's interesting about a hospital compared to other businesses is that signage is not just simply a mechanism to inform people that you exist, it's actually a safety concern. As we have patients come onto our campus, one of the primary things that we want to do for them is provide direct and efficient wayfinding so that they can go where they need to go. We have a 48-acre campus serving 2 medical office buildings and a hospital with multiple entrances. And many of our patients rely on those signs and their awareness of them to get to where they're going in the most efficient manner. A number of our patients are elderly and do not have mobility to traverse sufficient distances. So when we guide them to the MOB or we guide them to the emergency entrance, that's a critical thing for us on being able to make sure that they're routed to where they need to go. So we would submit that these changes and these signage requests form a public safety function in addition to the obvious one of directing and providing wayfinding for people who come onto the campus. So we would thank you for your consideration. Again, very happy to answer any questions and any of the technical aspects I would defer to our team.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, I'm concerned about this sign, this new wall sign facing the open space and golf course. Right, some people would often consider signs kind of a clutter, and especially when they're primarily facing open space and golf course. Can you, or do you want to defer to your team to?
No, I can speak to it, and any follow-up, we can certainly have a member of the team provide additional clarification. I think our desire in that is so that we can have the hospital be seen from 36. As you're coming from 36, there's not a lot of call-out as you drive down the highway to be able to see the building. Now, there's the sign, actually on 36, But the signage there on the end of the building that we're talking about, the new wall sign, provides visibility from people who are traversing 36.
And you don't feel that the addition of the sign closest to 36 accomplishes that? I mean, I think we're all
We
familiar
think
with
that's
the sign.
helpful, for sure. But we would prefer both. I will say, just not that this is particularly relevant, but I will say, having worked for and run hospitals on campuses in 8 states, there is, I think the signage that we have on our campus is appropriate. I don't think it's in any way excessive in terms of the existing signage. That doesn't speak to your question about the new sign. But certainly I think it's appropriate and probably on the smaller end of the number of signs and wayfinding placements that you would typically find on a hospital campus to help people navigate it.
Just to make sure I understand that, that wall sign is really sort of aimed at if you're coming down 36 from the west, right?
Correct.
Because that's probably where you're less likely to see
Yes.
the sign on 36 coming that direction. You'd see it pretty well coming from the east, but okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And there's one there now, is that right?
No, this is the
There's
new
not.
sign.
Oh, there's not one there now,
Right,
okay.
yeah. There's nothing there that faces
Okay.
towards 36. There's a rendering in the packet that seems to indicate that it's minimally visible. It's kind of the theme of that. I don't know if we have the packet available to pull up. Yeah, but there's like a black and white version of that shows it from a distance, I thought. Do we?
The one I saw was this.
Is it that one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it'll be lit up? Is that the idea that then you can see it if you're
Yes.
coming from
If you're
Boulder,
coming from
say?
Boulder.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I'll open it up for public comment now. I don't believe we have any written public comment regarding this. And nobody online, nobody in the room. Okay. We'll open it up then if you had a closing response and statement.
We appreciate the commission's consideration of the proposal, and thank you for your attentiveness to it.
Certainly, thank you. Do we have a staff response and closing statement?
No further comments at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last chance. Questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I don't think we have any other signage in the city of Louisville, do we, that faces 36, illuminated building signage? I'm just thinking of this as a precedent.
Yeah, not that I can think of at this time.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
Can we state directly also, so for just the wall sign that's being discussed facing 36, if it were to conform to the current code, what would that sign look like? Because it looked like it was a waiver on area and height, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So currently, it's the height is 4.4 feet. The sign regulations max out the height at 4 feet. Same with the area, it's about 131 and a half, give or take, square feet. The maximum wall sign area is 100 square feet.
Okay, so in terms of width, what would that, equate to? A few extra feet?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so we're talking about an exceedance in, 0.4 feet and several feet width.
Yeah. So the waiver on the illuminated sign to the freeway is simply the dimensions. Otherwise, they're within code to have an illuminated sign on the side of the building.
Yes, so since the location is near a public entrance, a wall sign is allowed on that face. It's strictly based on the area and height.
And the freestanding sign that's going to be relocated is also illuminated next to the freeway, I think.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing. Planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. Who would like to begin? We can work our way down from.
All right.
Okay, cool.
I'll start
thanks.
again.
We'll start. We'll just work our way across, and we'll throw you in there randomly, Mr.
I don't
Choi.
have any issue with, I think with any of these requests. I think they all seem reasonable for the purpose of a hospital wayfinding. And I do think that, that the sign, making it more visible on 36 is helpful. I know that the building kind of hides in there and people who aren't as familiar probably like to know that there's a hospital and where it is. So I don't have any concerns and would be in favor of this.
Thank you.
I agree.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mullane?
I'm also going to be in agreement. I appreciate, Chair, your concern about visibility of something and kind of orientation, and are we aiming it to travelers or to, is it aimed too much to, kind of open space areas? So I appreciate the concern. I guess at this point I'm okay with the proposal. So thanks.
Yeah, generally in support. My line of questioning about, I paused because I liked Commissioner Bang's question about setting a precedent, and I think it's a small enough exceedance over the existing code for the wall sign, and in this case, you're going to see it. We're talking a few extra inches in height, and then it's basically enough width to add the logo, and so it seems a small enough. You're going to see this thing regardless with the current code. So at least now it's a complete. You can actually see what it says. So I shared some Chair Brown Eyes' concerns about visibility from the open space, but I think it is appropriately targeting the highway, and I think it's a small enough exceedance that it's acceptable and meets the desire to make the sign visible from the highway. So I'm in favor.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Choi?
I'm in general agreement. I don't think that there are substantive enough changes or significant impacts from the waivers to be in opposition to this. I think it's a pretty good evolution for the signage package for one of our critical facilities within the city.
Thank you. Well, while I still remain concerned, I find myself in favor of it at this point in time. I think the waivers make perfect sense. Particularly, it's interesting to see when we've created that sign code back in 2019, we didn't really think about these kind of wayfinding signs as an example. And clearly, there's no need for that type of additional landscaping. It's not even the look that we're really after. It's kind of a cleaner, more modern look. So I can appreciate those waivers in particular. So thank you very much. With that, then, I would entertain a motion.
Okay, I'm ready. Motion to carry Resolution 7, Series 2025, recommending approval of a request for a planned unit development PUD amendment to replace existing freestanding signs and add a new wall sign on the hospital campus.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hunt.
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yes.
Commissioner Mullane.
Yes.
Commissioner Mahaley.
Yes.
Commissioner Choi.
Yes.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you all for your time this evening. With that, then, we'll move into our next item of business. I will now open the public hearing on a request for a ordinance amendment for parking minimum code. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission staff. Next, we'll have a presentation and testimony by the applicant, which is the city at this point. After this presentation, members of the public who have joined the meeting in person by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak in person is asked to complete a speaker card. Use the raise hand function if participating by computer or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. 2 people present at the meeting may pool their minutes to allow 1 person to speak for up to a total of 6 minutes. The purpose of the public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant and staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The planning commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, table, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your full name and city of residence. Does anyone participating in this hearing object to the procedure I've described? Seeing no objections, do we have notification?
Notice has been satisfied. This is a legislative item, so no property notifications, but just daily camera notice and then posting notices as well. So
Thank you. And do any planning commission members have any disclosures? Take it away, Mr. Post.
thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Matt Post, Senior Planner on the Community Development Team. The item before you tonight is consideration of an ordinance concerning parking minimums. And so the request is for approval of Resolution 8, Series 2025, recommending to the City Council approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the LMC concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse developments. This ordinance update is a direct result of House Bill 241304, which was adopted by the Colorado General Assembly in 2024. The bill requires that local governments, which are located within metropolitan planning organizations or members of DRCOG, eliminate minimum parking requirements for new multi-family developments and residential adaptive reuse developments within designated applicable transit service areas. Again, the city of Louisville is located within a metropolitan planning organization, and a total of 44 transit stops are present in the city that qualify as applicable transit service areas. We'll cover what those are in detail in later slides. As the bill is written, local governments are prohibited from enforcing parking minimums in the identified transit service areas for the specified uses as of June 30th of this year. So the bill specifically states that we may no longer enforce parking minimums in those areas, and we'll cover those areas and what those uses are, but as of June 30th. So House Bill 241304 applies to properties within the city that are at least partially located in or partially intersect with areas identified as having applicable transit service. Applicable transit service areas are areas within the city that are within a quarter mile of a transit stop that provides service at intervals of 30 minutes or less during peak transit hours. Here in the city of Louisville, those qualifying transit service lines would be the Dash Route that serves the South Boulder Road corridor, and then of course the Flatiron Flyer that stops at US 36 and McCaslin Station, which would be considered a bus rapid transit route for RTD. Applicable transit service areas were developed by the Department of Local Affairs, or DOLA, in collaboration with CDOT, the Colorado Department of Energy, and RTD. And then again, 44 transit stops are located in the city that qualify as those applicable transit service areas. The map that is presented on the slide shows all applicable transit service areas in the city. And these areas were identified by the bill, and these are the areas where the city is now prohibited from enforcing parking minimums, again, for multifamily and adaptive reuse residential developments. This map was generated with data provided directly by DOLA. The Department of Local Affairs specifically identified these transit areas. We pulled that data down and generated this map. As you can see, it is a buffer that is directly related to those transit stops within a quarter mile of those transit stops. You can see the Dash Route down South Boulder Road to Main Street to Pine Street, up via Appia, back to South Boulder Road. That would be the Dash Route. And then obviously the area on the southern part of the city there adjacent to Highway 36, which would be the Flatiron Flyer. So the quarter mile transit service areas where we may no longer enforce parking minimums, again, would apply to multifamily developments, but this would also include new mixed-use developments that contain a residential component. And when I say new, I do quite literally mean new developments. So new multifamily, new mixed-use with a residential component. The bill does, however, allow the city to continue to require parking minimums for the non-residential uses of new mixed-use developments within these applicable transit service areas. Again, that would only apply to the map that was on the previous slide. The prohibition also applies to, again, adaptive reuse projects. The big takeaway there is that an adaptive reuse project for an existing building where a use is being converted that contains 50% or more residential and gross floor area within that applicable transit service area is also exempt from parking minimums. Adaptive reuse is defined by the state bill specifically, just so we're on the same page with this, that is the conversion of an existing structure from the use for which it was constructed to a new use by maintaining elements of the structure and adapting such elements to a new use. So the reuse of the existing building for a new use. That is the general definition there. We elected not to adopt a new definition because the term is generally recognized and we can refer to the state bill if necessary when considering an adaptive reuse project. With this new ordinance, it's important to note that a developer may still voluntarily supply parking in an applicable transit service area. We, again, just simply cannot enforce our parking minimums anymore. And we'll talk more about staff's opinion on how that may play out in future development proposals. Some background on the bill here. So in addition to the prohibition on parking minimums, the law also clarifies that nothing prevents a jurisdiction from requiring parking compliance with affordable housing conditions. And so we'll generally see as a condition of financing or lending with an affordable project that a certain number of parking spaces are required. Again, if it's a proper affordable project and funding has been supplied for an affordable project, there would typically be CHAFA funding or something along those lines. They'll require minimum parking. We can still require minimum parking for an affordable project in this particular scenario. The law also does not prevent a local jurisdiction from providing bicycle parking, and it does not prevent a local jurisdiction from requiring accessible or ADA parking spaces or electric vehicle charging stations and infrastructure, specifically in line with the state EV code and the model EV code, which, if you all recall, we adopted last year. But we can only require those when an applicant voluntarily provides parking on site. I think we can linger on this for a little bit here, specifically regarding accessible spaces or accessible ADA spaces. The language of the bill specifically states that nothing in this law lowers the protections provided for persons with disabilities, including the number of parking spaces for persons who are mobility impaired under the ADA. Staff interpret this to mean that the city may require ADA parking spaces, again, when they are voluntarily supplied by the developer, and the same is true with electric vehicle charging stations. With ADA spaces, we do have to consider our building code requirements as well. We have specific accessible building code requirements. Under the IBC, there's specific occupancy classifications for building types. Those would fall under adaptive reuse and multifamily requirements. But even the building code requirements are specifically keyed toward provided parking spaces, right? So the building code requires ADA accessible spaces as a percentage of provided parking spaces on site. I can tell you that if there is a requirement for type A or type B ADA units in a specific multifamily project, we'd have to probably get a legal interpretation if that scenario comes up to determine whether or not we can actually require ADA spaces. I would have to imagine that if a developer is coming through with units that are ADA accessible, that they would hopefully be providing ADA parking spaces with those units as well. I would have to imagine that would be a one-off, that we would be seeing a project come through that's not providing ADA spaces with ADA accessible units. jumping into definitions here a little bit, multifamily is not defined in the law. It's explicitly not defined by the law. So DOLA has provided guidance on the bill, indicating that local jurisdictions may utilize their own definition of multifamily so long as it doesn't deviate or differ substantially from the state's definition of multifamily. The city's definition of multifamily is currently a building used by two or more families living independently of each other in separate dwelling units, but does not include hotels, motels, or resorts. That is almost identical to the state's definition. The state's definition is provided in your packet. The real takeaway there is that any structure with more than 2 dwelling units in it is considered a multifamily or a multi-unit dwelling unit, which is how our code defines it. So staff elected not to update or change that definition. Specifically, we would have had a pretty significant episode of scope creep. If we would have decided to change that definition, it would have caused us to have to go through the entire code with a fine-tooth comb to find every instance of multi-unit or multifamily. So we elected not to update that definition again because it is so closely aligned with the state code. And then no other definitions are proposed with this particular ordinance. So in regard, again, a little background here in regard to the zoning and review process for multifamily, mixed-use residential, and then residential adaptive reuse projects within applicable transit service areas, staff will utilize current land use allowances that are currently codified within the zoning ordinance to determine whether a multi-unit, mixed-use, or adaptive reuse project is permitted by right, or whether it would require a special review use for approval. A number of zone districts within applicable transit service areas that allow multi-unit uses, allow those multi-unit uses as special review uses specifically, not by right. As the commission is aware, special review use includes review of additional criteria to ensure that the proposed use is located in an appropriate location, given the context and character of the area, adjacent development, and then also the consideration of any potential adverse impacts that a particular use may have on adjacent properties or the neighborhood in general. It's important to note that as part of this bill, parking minimums may not be imposed as a condition of approval with a special review use. Again, the bill prohibits, as long as it's in an applicable transit service area, and a special review use would be required to establish a multi-unit or multifamily dwelling, we cannot apply conditions that would amount to minimum parking requirements. And so just a quick note of zone district breakdowns here. So zone districts where multifamily or multi-unit dwellings are permitted as a special review use would include residential estate, residential low density, rural residential, business office, commercial community, and commercial neighborhood. It's important to note that these districts where multi-unit dwellings are permitted as a special review use, specifically the single-family residential districts, RE, RL, and RR, I'm calling them single-family residential because that's the predominant land use types that exist in those districts today. We do have additional provisions in the ordinance that significantly limit density, right? So I'm bringing this up because I don't anticipate, or staff rather don't anticipate, a free-for-all in these zone districts with 20, 30 dwelling units per acre. In most circumstances, you may be able to add one additional unit if the property size is large enough to accommodate that. So for those particular zone districts, we don't anticipate any significant increase in density that may come with development for groups that may take advantage of this particular prohibition on parking minimums. So multifamily, multi-unit uses are also permitted as by right. Again, obviously, any new development project that comes in still needs to come before the commission and the council for approval. The delineation between by right and special review use is simply in our use table. A by right use has a yes in it, where the special review use is subject to those additional review criteria because of the sensitivity of the zone district that those uses are located in. So where multifamily dwellings are permitted as a by right use include residential medium density, residential high density, mixed use residential, and then some of our planned community zone districts Those would be where GDPs, right, which we discussed earlier this evening, would permit multifamily uses specifically. These particular zone districts are generally considered appropriate for high-density residential or medium-density residential. I think staff anticipate that these would be the most likely candidates for future redevelopment within the applicable transit service areas. These particular zone districts would be the most likely areas where we see redevelopment that may take advantage of the parking minimums ordinance here. So moving into analysis again, we are, or we may not rather, enforce parking minimums in these areas after June 30th. We did some analysis into our policy documents in regard to parking minimums and found that previously adopted plans, including the housing plan, actually generally support the state's efforts to reduce parking, and then more specifically, the city housing plan identified minimum parking requirements as a significant barrier to additional housing development within the city. The study indicates that parking minimums increase development costs, reduce buildable area on constrained sites, and negatively impact the feasibility of projects, specifically in areas near transit where parking demand is generally lower. The study included modeling as part of the feasibility analysis and demonstrated that reduced parking requirements had a greater positive impact on project viability than increased height incentives. As an example, the study looked at scenarios that reduced parking from 1.4 to 1 per unit, and the corresponding modeling revealed that the reduction in parking yielded higher residual land values for those particular projects, which thereby improved the financial feasibility of those particular projects and then increased the likelihood that that project would move forward to completion. The study also recommends lower parking ratios and parking-related incentives, again, specifically in transit corridors and downtown Louisville. The housing study recommends this with an effort to encourage additional housing development. Also just so happens that those areas that the housing plan recommends revisions to the parking to reduce parking requirements directly correspond with the applicable transit service areas identified by the bill, again, in downtown Louisville, and then those transit stop locations, notwithstanding zoning, the existing zoning designations in those areas. So some additional analysis, again, just want to, make sure the commission and the public are aware here that developers may still voluntarily supply parking for eligible projects within the applicable transit service areas. Again, we simply cannot enforce a parking minimum. So we're looking at a project, we'll enforce our parking standards, 50 units. If we have one parking space per unit, we'll say you need to park this with 50 spaces, right? We can't do that anymore. That said, staff do anticipate that most eligible projects will continue to include off-street parking on a voluntary basis. And this expectation is supported by, I think, many conversations we've had with developers where we've attempted or encouraged them in some instances to actually reduce their parking on site. And in most circumstances, their response is along the lines of market feasibility, right? They look at market feasibility and they determine that specifically in a suburban community like Louisville, they need to provide parking on that site in order to make it feasible from a marketing perspective. The second major item there would be lending, again, financing. Most financiers and most lenders, when we talk to developers, they actually require parking as a condition of financing and lending. So we do work with developers on a regular basis. If they're overparked or we feel they're overparked, to consider reductions. A lot of times what we hear back from them is it doesn't match market conditions for this particular use and area, and or it's a condition of our funding. So again, we anticipate that most projects will continue to include parking in these areas. I think some other notes here. It's right. I think Louisville is unique in this sense. I think if we were in a more dense downtown urban environment with rail lines, it may be a different story. But again, I do believe that to maintain financial viability for the life of the development for most of these projects, we will continue to see parking proposed. So while we're obligated to comply with the state law, again, the practical realities here is that we'll see additional parking with some of these projects. I think one of the other things we want to talk about here are potential concerns or risks. The state did provide some guidance in regard to risk mitigation. It's not necessarily worth sharing at the moment. I can tell you that there's not a lot of information in it, but I think, to the extent that any impacts, remain unknown, I think they'll depend on the location, scale, and size of any particular development, as well as ongoing market behavior. I think we can continue to monitor those conditions and then consider a policy response if appropriate and in line with the law. So on to the ordinance proposal here. We are proposing updates to Chapter 17, and more specifically, Section 1720 only, which is our off-street parking requirements. Key updates include a new subsection in LMC 1720-10F, which will prohibit the enforcement of off-street parking for qualifying projects within applicable transit service areas, and a provision indicating that the new subsection that we're creating in 1720 there supersedes any existing design guidelines, GDPs, or PUDs. So we have multiple design guidelines, our industrial design guidelines, which residential wouldn't be allowed industrial anyways, but we have commercial and then mixed use. They all have their own parking requirements there. This specific provision, again, will ensure that this new subsection supersedes our design guidelines, and then any parking requirements that would apply to GDPs or PUDs that are in applicable transit service areas with those proposed uses, again, would be exempt from parking requirements. We're also proposing to revise Section 1720.020 that references that new subsection that I just mentioned, and then we'll include a new subsection clarifying that the entirety of Section 1720.020 does not apply where parking is exempt under the new subsection 1720.10. We'll also update Section 1720.025A, which is parking in downtown Louisville. Again, the entirety of downtown Louisville is within an applicable transit service area, so the language provided in that section mirrors what's in the initial subsection, indicating that parking minimums are no longer enforceable for the specific use types. So no other ordinance updates. Again, we kept it as targeted as we possibly could within the off-street parking section there. And I think with that, we move forward recommending approval of Resolution 8, Series 2025, recommending to the City Council approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the LMC concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse developments. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Open it up. Questions of staff?
I just have one clarifying question. I think I heard you say this, but assuming that a lot of projects will still voluntarily provide parking, if they do voluntarily provide parking, then we can still apply our EV and accessibility requirements on those voluntary spaces.
Correct.
Okay.
So bus 228, does that not meet the 4-hour? Has it been rerouted? It still runs around somewhere within Louisville.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't think it actually meets the standard for service every 30 minutes during peak transit service hours. Yeah, I think from the information we gathered from DOLA, it's the Dash and the Flatiron Flyer only. Yeah.
All right. And then if there was a private shuttle that was operated, perhaps even on a schedule that met those requirements, how does that impact these allowances?
Private shuttles were part of the consideration that DOLA and the Department of Transportation worked into the application of applicable transit service areas. And again, they had to meet that standard of service every 30 minutes during peak transit hours. So if a private shuttle or another transit agency, there's other transit agencies around the state that operate locally or regionally, if it doesn't meet that standard of service every 30 minutes, then it's not considered part of the applicable transit service area.
But it would be.
It would be if there's service every 30 minutes, yes, at a stop.
So that's an interesting one in particular, right? Because if there's a private shuttle and then the funding dries up for that shuttle and the parking minimums have been allowed, I guess the same thing is potential with public yeah, with RTD, but
Yeah, I'm not sure of any private shows. I guess I'll say again, DOLA didn't identify any service outside of the RTD service that's an applicable service area, so.
okay. Additional questions?
Did you use an example earlier on where you said on a 1 acre lot, 20 units, if they had no parking, they might additionally squeeze in 1 unit? Is that what I heard you say?
Oh, I don't know that I said that. No, I mean, but I would have to imagine that this bill would absolutely lead to more units where they can fit them in, where the density permits it. Again, our density limitations will still apply. There's no change there, so, you know, we'd see how that works out. I can tell you right now that a lot of projects we review, we find their limit is density, our density limitations in most circumstances. Obviously, every property is different. The configuration of those particular properties and size would impact that. But I would have to imagine that we would likely see more density as a result of this bill if developers choose to take advantage.
Right. And conceivably, I think there's still parking requirement minimums if there's commercial as part of the development.
As part of a mixed-use development, yes, in the service area, yes.
Again, I mean, it's all hypothetical, but conceivably somebody could turn it into multifamily only and remove the commercial component to potentially improve their density.
Potentially, yeah, if it's within line with our density limitations, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
okay. Thanks.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you very much. We'll open it up for public comment now. You could even stay up there perhaps while hear it there. Seeing none online. Gathering, all right, thank you. How about a closing statement?
No closing statement today.
We'll keep it super clean. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I will now close public hearing. The planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented during deliberations. No further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. Who would like to begin? Commissioner
All right.
Choi, I'm looking at you, but
I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
start again. I'll
Thank
just
you.
say that obviously state law dictates this. There are also good reasons for it, but I think that the amendments, the specific amendments to the ordinance make sense as a way to incorporate the new state law in the most elegant and simple way possible. So I am in favor.
thank you. Commissioner Bangs.
Yep, nothing to add.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Moline.
Yeah, I too will be in support and found the staff report and its recommendations very helpful and consistent with how I feel about this application. So thank you.
Commissioner Mahaley.
I think it's an efficient implementation of the state law, which we need to do. So I'm in favor for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Choi.
Ditto.
Okay, I'll wax a little bit more. Thank you I know this kind of ended up being a crunch on a certain level to make this all comply. Appreciate your efforts on that. And yet, many an environmentalist and progressive urban planner have railed against minimum parking for decades now, really. So I'm encouraged to see us do this. I would also like to encourage staff and council to consider perhaps abolishing minimums in other areas throughout the city. I think there's any number of good reasons for this, not just because the state made us do it. So hopefully we'll be able to see that perhaps as we move forward with comp plan, move forward with other zoning requirements and rewrites, that we can evaluate that. I think we're all familiar with certain areas of town where there's seas of parking that literally none of us have ever seen filled. That has any number of negative environmental impacts. So hopefully we can get even more progressive with this move at some point. So I do find myself in favor at this time. With that, I would entertain a motion.
I move approval of Resolution Number 8, Series 2025, a resolution recommending approval of an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse development.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs,
Yes.
Commissioner Mullane,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Very yes. Thank you all. Appreciate your work on it. With that then, we'll open it up to planning commission comments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Seeing none. Staff comments.
Nothing here.
Okay, thank you very much. We're looking at possible comp plan update in July.
Yeah, the schedule has us releasing a public review draft in and around July, so it'd be concurrent with that sort of community engagement window, and so you'll have a draft to react to and discuss in July as the plan. So that'll be a lengthy discussion we expect. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. With that then, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all, and thank you all.
Recording stopped.